In brightest day, in blackest night, all other podcasts tremble in fright. Losers cower before the power. Oranges lust and blues you can trust. Indigos feel and white ones heal. Yellows scare and green ones dare. That sapphire love and black hands glove will rock your foundation without hesitation. Chad and Marge face evil's might. Respect their power, for they'll make you see the light.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chad Bokelman.
I'm Mark Marble.
And this is the LanternCast.
Episode 309.
That's right. Episode 309 is not a special number, but it's a special episode because we are doing a crossover. Our first actual, true crossover with another podcast, the Dr. DC podcast. And joining us from the Dr. DC podcast is the man with the worst kept secret identity since Oliver Queen, the Doctor himself.
Yep, that's about right. That seems to check out. I think everyone in Star City knows my identity too.
Jeff Johns, everybody. Jeff Johns.
Hey guys.
Hey, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And thank you for having been on our show.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, a lot of laughs. The longest episode of Doc DC to date, right?
I think so. It's close. Our Justice League one was pretty long, but I think this one might eclipse it.
Until the editing process kicks in.
Oh,
we'll have 5 minutes each.
That's assuming there's an editing process at all.
Oh man, so we actually have a topic in mind. What we're going to do on the Dr. DC podcast, which aired last Wednesday, or this week, but Wednesday. If you haven't listened to that, go check it out. It's Green Lantern 101. Essentially what we did is we followed the Doc's format and had a bunch of people ask a bunch of questions about the Green Lantern universe, in which we all piled in our respective answers. We were thinking about keeping the more complicated sort of questions for this show, but that would just be copying the Doc's podcast. So what we decided to do was the top 5 most important moments in Green Lantern history for each of us. That can be a single issue, an arc, whatever. And we decided that would be a little more interesting. It would get some insight into our personal preferences, our history with the character, and so on and so forth. But before we go into it, you guys, the regular listeners of our show, don't know anything about the Doc. So, Doc, go ahead and tell people who you are, how you got into comics, what your podcast is, and then we'll jump right into the top 5.
If it's all right with you, I won't tell them who I am, because this is a whole group of people that to whom my secret identity hasn't already been exposed. My birth name is Doctor. My last name is DC. I've talked about it a lot on our show, which is I got into comics because my father had sort of stacks of old Silver Age comics that weren't necessarily super well looked after. But I think he found them one day and he gave them to me. He thought, you might like these. And it was mostly DC. There was a small stack of Invincible Iron Man in there. But then it was also Flash, Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes, Justice League of America. It had the first issue of DC Comics Presents was in that collection. Which is Superman and the Flash team up. And I got really into that world. And between that and then just growing up in the era with the X-Men cartoon and with the Batman the Animated Series and everything that sort of flowed out of the DCAU after that, I got just swept up in superhero-dom. And for whatever reason, I have a brain that can absorb lore. I'm terrible at math. I have limited I would say hard skills. But things like Lord of the Rings, Star Trek, even like James Bond, DC Comics, I've managed to like absorb the lore. I like immersing myself in those worlds and learning everything about the characters and how their powers work and their histories and all those things. And I find that like fascinating and interesting, and it's something that I'm actually good at. I haven't 100% monetized that ability yet, but that's basically what. For a while, I ran a blog online that maybe some of your listeners encountered because it was relatively big at one time. It was Modern Mythologies. It's modernmythologies.wordpress.com. I wrote a bunch of like long form sort of essays about like the mythological significance of characters and storylines in DC Comics. And then, yeah, we're less than a year now into the podcast sort of format of that, but instead of just me rambling on and on and on, we take questions from listeners, and my cohorts, Colin and Richard, have sort of varying degrees of awareness. Richard is generally comic book aware. Colin is not at all, but I think that makes for some fun because sometimes you go to explain something and you say like a weird sentence like Shadow Thief killed Firestorm with Shining Knight's magic sword, and to me it makes perfect sense, and then you look over at Colin's face and it clearly doesn't. So it's been a lot of fun sort of exploring comics from both perspectives, from the perspective of someone super immersed in it and also for newcomers and like where the jumping on points are and things like that. So that's like the brief history of Dr. DC, I think.
Absolutely. And for those who want to catch up and listen, new episodes every Wednesday?
Every Wednesday. That's right.
Awesome. So the format for this show, guys, we're going to talk about, like I said, our top 5 favorite moments in Green Lantern history. Again, arcs, issues, doesn't matter. And what we kind of agreed to do is leave out the main Lantern origins for the most part because we figured that might be too easy. So we kind of that's our only caveat. What we're going to do is we're going to do a roundtable. We're going to each name our specific number, what it is, and then we'll go back around and then explain what why we chose that. So, Mark, you want to kick it off?
Should we let the guests start it off, Chad?
I mean, it's the only reason I don't say that is because I feel like I know him, and all right, fine, go ahead, Doc. What's your number 5?
Hey, it's your house, your rules. Okay, my number 5. I feel like we might expose through my list that my top moments I think aren't so much the out of continuity big moments, like that they were big in terms of comics, but more big in terms of like I just said, the lore, like the stuff that I'm really into. So my number 5 might surprise you a little bit. I put Green Lantern, The Lost Army, number 1. And I put that in because that is Guy dual wielding red and green, but it's not just wearing both. It actually affects his costume. He's like an actual both lanterns.
Yeah, for sure. Mark, what's your number 5?
I'm looking at my list, making sure I have them ranked the way I really want them to be ranked. I would say number 5, I'm going to go with Sinestro Corps War.
Awesome. And my number 5 is probably a surprise to some listeners considering how low it's ranked, but my number 5 is The Power of Ion, which is the story arc from Green Lantern Volume 3, issues 144 through 150. Doc, take it away. Why is that your number 5?
Right. So I find the idea. Well, the one thing I'll say is that I have this on the list because of what I feel it introduces to the mythology. I don't necessarily think that The Lost Army as a series actually delved into it enough or took advantage of it. But in this moment where you see Guy Gardner dual wielding these rings and it actually affects his costume, and you see that he's simultaneously a red and a green lantern. It's not them fighting with each other. It's not them one against the other. It's that they coexist in him. That opens a whole door in terms of the lore to explore what I would just call maybe like the secondary emotional spectrum. This isn't a thing that exists. I'm like, this is purely speculative. But like, if you think of in the real world, we have the primary colors, like red, yellow, blue, and then you blend those and you get the other colors. If you imagine that the emotional spectrum, even though it's red and orange and yellow and that, if you picture those as the primary emotional colors, then what that Guy Gardner look and existence calls into question is, what does it mean to blend some of those? What is the emotion between will and rage? And I don't know that I have an answer for that. Like, I don't know if vengeance or aggression count as emotions, but what I wish that series would have done was explore that idea further. What are like the secondary emotions of the spectrum? What happens when you blend and mix those things, when they work harmoniously together and not in competition? So maybe I consider it more of a lost opportunity, but I think it's important that it happened canonically, because it means that if there's a writer with the imagination and the balls basically to go after it, they could really blow the door off what the emotional spectrum is capable of, I think.
Yeah, that was also a story arc that introduced a concept which unfortunately didn't get picked up in Edge of Oblivion, but the idea of that when these lanterns charged up at various power pyramids in this alternate universe, their color changed too.
Yes.
Which I thought was interesting. Which we both thought was interesting.
Right, the idea that more or less that their version of the central power batteries were more like it was like universal, that it wasn't just one emotion only, that pretty much if you had seven Green Lanterns hovering around a Red Lantern power battery pyramid, that it would change to green and you'd be able to charge from it. That it was
exactly.
Which to be fair, even though it's not something not a concept that Chad and I like, the idea of the emotional reservoir, that there being one.
Right. Yeah.
That being said, based on the concept that there was an emotional reservoir, that kind of made some sense. The idea that at the end of the day, all these power batteries are pulling from the same raw source, and it doesn't really matter what color it is at any given moment. That all the emotional energy essentially flows together and it can be used almost interchangeably depending on who's around. Which also gave more of a logical explanation for why there could be a war of light in Relic's universe, why they were fighting to gain control. Because obviously, if there was only a limited amount of energy or light left, if you were the color that was left standing, then all that energy would be yours, and if not, it could be taken and used by anybody. So I did
exactly.
like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things in those storylines, Lights Out onward, basically post John's, that are kind of, you could take them or leave them. But that's more a matter to me of execution than the potential. Like, I think there's interesting stuff in there, and that's why this actually made my list, because I think it's fascinating. I just don't think it went deeply enough.
Well, Cullen Bunn was really seemed to get the Lantern. So both Chad and I, Chad more than me, had issues with the way he kept diverting so many pages to John Stewart's flashbacks in those like 5 or 6 issues that he had before he got that book got the axe. But clearly he was telling a more interesting story than what Edge of Oblivion became. Edge of Oblivion was more or less a textbook It was an unmemorable story, other than the fact that it got everybody back into the universe, which you knew was going to happen anyway.
Right.
And one day we'll have to go back and talk about, because we did save that when Cullen Bunn actually, at least temporarily, floated out in what was it? Was it a tweet that he put that out? What his original plan was going to be, and then pulled it back real quick.
It was an AMA. Cullen Bunn has AMAs on Twitter every now and then, which is Ask Me Anything for those of you who don't know.
Yeah.
So we sent out a tweet asking what the original plan was for the rest of the series if he didn't get the axe after 6, and because Edge of Oblivion, which something DC does sometimes which pisses me off, is when they just make these editorial decisions. And Edge of Oblivion, which was supposed to follow up after Lost Army, left all of these threads completely dropped and never picked up again, including Krona and Relic.
Right.
So I asked Cullen on Twitter, and he answered. He had a whole like list of things, and then we retweeted it like, holy crap, and then it disappeared. Which I guess means yeah, which I guess means we brought too much attention, and Cullen maybe was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. But we screenshot it.
Interesting.
So we have those answers still.
I'm always fascinated by stories cut short and things like that too, because sometimes writers are begging your indulgence to be patient and actually let them build up to something, and sometimes either the sales or if there's like an editorial thing happening, it doesn't allow for that kind of time. So sometimes it's a little too bad that way.
Yeah. All right, Mark, Sinestro Corps War, go for it, man.
I has between 4 and 5. I almost put this 4 when you go to my number 4, then it makes sense why this probably takes one step below. Even though I think Sinestro Corps War is more of a complete story and more of a satisfying story. Part of the reason why I put Sinestro Corps War in here is because obviously before we got to Sinestro Corps War after Green Lantern Rebirth, there was an interest in Green Lantern again that Jeff Johns had brought to it. But it wasn't like the whole world was watching, or the comic world was really watching necessarily Green Lantern at that point. I mean, Rebirth was good, Green Lantern Corps Recharge, so the whole mythos was being restarted and going back to its roots, and there was an interest there. But if you go back and you look at the first 7 or 8 issues of maybe the Jeff Johns Green Lantern run, once they relaunched that series, in 2005, they were okay. It wasn't, you had the Manhunters, and you had some stuff with Hector Hammond and pre-Black Entity, Black Hand. But it wasn't anything spectacular. To me, I think that book didn't really take off until they had the Revenge of the Green Lanterns or whatever with the Lost Lanterns and bringing Cyborg Superman back.
Right.
But the Sinestro Corps War as a whole, that took everybody by surprise because of the fact that how that was really supposed to be just a Green Lantern. It was supposed to be just a Green Lantern only event, which for the most part it was, as in how it was being contained. But the interest in that spread pretty quickly, and the buzz about that spread very quickly. So there was a lot more interest in regular comic just beyond your normal Green Lantern fan base, and the ramifications of that obviously had an effect going forward with future events that were certainly originally designed again to be a Green Lantern only story, but then it branches out because now there was so much more interest in Hal, and was really a high profile character, as we've talked about before on our show, that probably at the very least what was Sinestro Corps War was 2007, right? 2007, I believe.
Yeah.
Or at least it finished in 2007, but from 2007 probably through the end of 2009, you could probably make the absolute legitimate case based on relevance, based on stories being told, based on sales, based on interest, that for that moment in time, Hal Jordan was essentially part of the Trinity. It was Batman, Superman, and Hal Jordan, because let's be honest, Wonder Woman in general doesn't sell a whole lot of books, and her stories really are not very particularly memorable. But Hal was in the Green Lantern stories were having a huge impact on the DCU as a whole, not just in Green Lantern. So,
and those stories were so cosmic,
yes,
too, right? I mean, Green Lantern Rebirth, I think, really reinvented the power that they were all dealing with and using. And then Sinestro Corps War, when you just see the scope of these armies wielding that sort of terrifying power, it really I think put into perspective how major heavy hitter Hal Jordan was for those who might not have thought so before.
Right. And you had that one shot was so memorable because there's so many big reveals happen in that one shot. It's hard to remember, or for a lot of people it's hard now to go back and remember how much stuff do we take for granted now, or stuff that we know has happened, but so much got introduced in that one issue. That was the issue that you found, that we were told that Ion was essentially the Green Lantern's version of Parallax, that he was a living entity. That's where the Ion power came from. We were surprised, when you basically the heralds, you will, of the Sinestro Corps. You had Sinestro, and you had and then you had Cyborg Superman, which wasn't that much of a surprise. Superboy Prime was pretty cool. Kyle becoming Parallax was, that caught a lot of people by surprise. And the huge reveal at the end that not only was the Anti-Monitor back in the DCU, but the Anti-Monitor was the guardian of the Sinestro Corps. So I think
that was
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think that to me solidified just how it showed that DC wanted to put a lot of significance into the Green Lantern corner of things. When you pull out a character as devastatingly powerful as the Anti-Monitor, and you put him on the side of the Sinestro Corps, then how powerful must the Green Lanterns have to be, or how much must they have to overcome to ever have a hope of defeating something like that, right? There's a real turning point there that you've just touched on, where Green Lantern is given basically the reins to be the powerful one.
True, and then you also have the fact that was also the storyline that basically allowed Green Lanterns to kill as a ramification for dealing with this. So again, changing the power set, changing the status quo. But that just opened people's eyes for what Green Lantern could be, and it just started. It picked up from where Rebirth left off, and it started the pinnacle going as you were building towards the apex of what what Green Lantern probably has ever been, and certainly under the Jeff Johns era, as I like to phrase it, the golden age of Jeff Johns. That was the golden age of Jeff Johns. The second step, going up on that ladder, was the Sinestro Corps War, and I think that's why I have it that
totally.
high.
I mean, especially along the lines of the Anti-Monitor, just because a lot of people forget. In Crisis on Infinite Earths, one of the first things the Anti-Monitor did was take the Guardians off the playing field.
Yeah.
So Crisis didn't have that head-to-head face-off. John Stewart was involved, but barely. The guy was gone. Hal wasn't the Lantern. The Guardians were in some sort of stasis, and the Green Lantern Corps was dealing with that. So when you got to Sinestro Corps War, not only was it a huge deal for just the Green Lantern mythos, but and a sleeper hit because nobody was really expecting it to be as big as it was. But just for DC fans, it's just and the Guardians even mentioned it, in that storyline. They say something to the effect of last time we were out of the picture and now we have the opportunity to face you. So you finally get to see what it's like to have the Green Lantern Corps go up against the Anti-Monitor and the Guardians and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of cool, kind of seeing that. Not necessarily even a rematch, but why? I mean, he has to consider them a threat to take them off the playing field during Crisis, right? So why did he take them off the playing field? All right, let's show that fight. Yeah. So that was cool. So mine is the Power of Ion. It's no secret to the listeners of this show that the Power of Ion is one of my single favorite Green Lantern stories of all time. It's a huge character piece for Kyle Rayner, and has a bunch of good character moments, especially for people like John Stewart and Jade. For those of you who don't know, this is a storyline where it's almost like a bookend of sorts for the first 50 issues or so of 150, whatever. No, 100.
About 100. It was about 100.
Yeah, about 100. About 100 issues of the Kyle Rayner run. It kind of wraps up some of the ideas put forth in Emerald Twilight and Final Night and some of the stuff with Oblivion and things like that. And then takes us into this new era by way of this godlike power that Kyle Rayner receives. And spoilers, the way it ends is the way I think is a big character piece for Kyle Rayner. Kyle Rayner gets the powers of a god, uses them for a while, But after a few conversations, starts thinking, and in the wrap up issue for that story arc in issue 150, goes to Oa, meets Ganthet on Oa, pours that power back into the central power battery, reignites the battery, and brings back to life, essentially, the Guardians of the Universe. So it kind of wraps up all these kind of tail ends and things from that have been established in the Kyle Rayner run, and now kind of sets the stage for things to come. And the Green Lantern run would wrap up a little while later, and then we get Rebirth and all that. But without this, you'd have another sort of story where you have to reignite the power battery, bring back the Guardians, blah, blah, blah. And I don't think it could have been done quite as well as this story did it. Because this story not only was a good story, but it had something that I think is missing from a lot of current comics, is a lot of characterization beats. There's moments where Kyle and Jade, along with John Stewart and his girlfriend Marin, I think, go dancing in a club because John just got back the use of his legs thanks to Kyle and some psychotherapy, and they decide to celebrate not by like, hey, I'm gonna whip up a ring for you and we'll go fight an alien so that you can feel alive again, but they decide, let's just go dancing and enjoy life. So they devote a couple of pages to that. And then you have the John Stewart issue where it's revealed that John Stewart as a kid took a car joyriding and got in an accident with his little brother and what he thought was a puppy in the back seat. But the puppy died. But it turns out he blocked out part of his memory, and that wasn't a puppy. His little sister was in the back seat, and she died. And he's been living with that guilt and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of that in there, and that issue was like riveting, and it's mostly John Stewart reliving his past on a couch in a psychotherapist's office. Like, how many times do you get that these days? So not only is it a fantastic story, it's a great end point for a certain moment within the Kyle Rayner run, and fantastic beginning.
And it's a nice bookend too, because if you look at Kyle Rayner becomes Green Lantern because Hal Jordan basically gains unlimited power and uses it to destroy. It's kind of a nice like bookend for Kyle Rayner to get almost unlimited power and use it to create. Like it really like separates their two kind of characters there. It really like, I don't know. I like the idea that it's like a counterpoint to Emerald Twilight a little bit.
Yeah, that's true.
And going along with that, it also, in a way, trying to give Hal a little props here, that it also gives, but at the same time mostly, I mean just as much, Kyle. It shows Kyle's ability to not just learn from mistakes, but his ability to basically back to like the Clint Eastwood, the Dirty Harry line, a man's got to know his limitations. That that Kyle knows what he can do and what he can't do, and Hal's one of the ones that comes to him and tells him, kind of has been that voice in his head, kind of trying to keep him on the straight and narrow, not because, as he points out, not because he thinks Kyle's going to do the wrong thing with it, just because he wishes there were somebody to tell him the same thing when he was in that position. That he wishes there was somebody whispering in his ear as a counter, as we would know now, as we know now, it would be a counter to the whole Parallax Sinestro influence to him, but it doesn't matter. The fact is he wished there was somebody to point out that there could be ramifications you don't understand. And so even though Kyle could have changed the past, even though Kyle had the ability to basically prevent Hal from going rogue, and yet keeping everything connected time-wise, thread-wise, so everything would still be exactly the way it was now. Not where you couldn't do that because Hal had to die, had to become Parallax so he could die saving the Earth in Final Night, and it's like Kyle made it clear that that's not the way time worked for him. That it was he could keep it, he could just basically alter this one piece and keep everything tied together. But yet at the end of the day, he decides that that he doesn't really have. He's not the right person for this. He doesn't have the knowledge or the experience for this power, so he gives it back to though, as we've seen, probably not history would say maybe not the best choice, But he returns the power to where it came from, and obviously up until Jeff Johns kind of crapped on him, Ganthet would be the one person, the one guardian you would trust with the power to begin with, to oversee this and to raise these guardian babies to instill in them a new set of basic humanity.
Kyle's the only one of those sort of main lanterns that I would trust with that kind of absolute power. It's why he's the only one that made sense as the White Lantern. It's why he's so great in that Omega Men series where he's. I love. Okay. I like Kyle in that series because he's the only one questioning the right or the wrong of the actions around him. Because I think what that Omega Men series points out is that both sides have lost sight of the victory at what cost sort of thing. So I like Kyle in there. I think he's the only one that I wouldn't want Jon Stewart to have unlimited power. I definitely wouldn't want Guy to have unlimited power.
I'm just not a big fan of the Omega Men series. That's all. No, but I agree with everything you said. Listeners of the show know. I believe that Kyle should always be a torchbearer of some kind. Is it cool to see him now back as a Green Lantern? Sure. But I think based on what we've seen so far, has he been utilized very well, Mark?
No.
Yeah.
Overall, no. I think, and again, he's getting a decent amount of face time considering that they had been they kind of purposely have been partnering him up with Hal. So which if they took away the joking, bickering, dick waving all the time between the two of them, that would be really cool because of the fact that you really never got many opportunities to have on equal, quote unquote, equal footing as they're ever going to get. You never really had Kyle and Hal as Green Lantern doing all that much together. It was always Hal's Parallax, Kyle is Green Lantern, Hal's the Spectre, Kyle is Green Lantern, Kyle is Ion, Hal is the Spectre. It was almost never on equal footing, and certainly almost never as Green Lanterns. And for them to be kind of partnered up, it would be cool to see that, but it just constantly becomes anything I can do, or you can do, I can do better, even though it's mostly coming from Kyle, seemingly, as he's being written, Kyle's insecurity and living in Hal's shadow. But I don't think he's being used that well. I really, given the choice once the whole Dr. Manhattan thing is over with, which won't be till friggin' next year, that it would be nice. I would like to see Kyle go back to being white. But we'll see. Who knows what's going to happen between now and then? But
yeah. All right, number 4s. Mark, take it away.
So 4 and 5. I mean, number 3 technically is really close to my number 5. When I get to it, it makes sense. But number 4, I'm going to go with Blackest Night.
My number 4 it didn't have a traditional storyline title, so I went with one of the individual issues. I call it Captives of the Mad God, which is Green Lantern Volume 3, issues 5 through 8 from 1990.
I went with Green Lantern Rebirth number 4.
All right. Mark, take it away, man.
So again, kind of following up what I said for Sinestro Corps War. If Rebirth started everything rolling and started everything trending upward, and Sinestro Corps was taking it close to the top of the mountain, obviously at the very least the build up towards in the first few issues of Blackest Night were absolutely the pinnacle of what Green Lantern was as far as interest, popularity, exposure, its Q rating all throughout everything, all media. You could sort of absolutely make the case that that Blackest Night pretty much was probably the main reason that Green Lantern movie was pushed as quickly as, not as quickly is relative, but I mean the reason why they wanted to do Green Lantern was because of how popular that movie, because of how popular Green Lantern had become, and the scope of the stories they could tell with it. Blackest Night, obviously, and I'll get to what it was following up on, because there's something else on my list that kind of like bridges the gap. But Blackest Night took the emotional spectrum concept and really fleshed it out more. We actually didn't really get to see the Indigo Tribe until in full glory, if you will, until Blackest Night, what they could do and how their powers truly worked. The fact that the Blackest Nights began as this is going to be a DC event, and basically between DiDio talking to Jeff Johns, and it turned into this huge corporate event, this huge DC event, not a Green Lantern event, with all the miniseries and and the tie-ins and everything else. It was just, and there were very interesting concepts introduced in it. We got between the Green Lantern issues and the actual miniseries, we got all the other entities, the emotional of the spectrum. We got to see where they essentially came from. Seeing whether you thought it was fair or not, seeing Sinestro be kind of like kind of throwing a curveball, but we kind of figured Hal would be the one to be hosting the White Entity. That Sinestro was the one who actually got to host the White Entity. There were just lots of things in there, bringing back classic Parallax, kind of, sort of, because of the fact that they still had to ruin it with the stupid jagged teeth thing, but having him become Parallax again for Green Lantern 50, keeping that, basically setting that tradition and keeping that going as he took on the Spectre, picking up on the threads of things that were kind of touched upon back in Green Lantern Rebirth about the relationship between the Spectre and Parallax, and just Blackest Night was the absolute height of what Green Lantern was, and especially now where we look at where Green Lantern is, certainly from a sales perspective and an interest perspective, and even how and the stories that are being told, and how it's kind of sad seeing where we've come. Like in 9 years definitely seems a long time ago.
Yeah.
But
it's kind of crazy that something that big and that broad in scope was so, generally speaking, cohesive and well written. You think maybe even if the main story is tight, all of the other stuff's got to be relatively weak just because there's too much going on. But Blackest Night, doesn't have too many major weak links, even across those tie-ins and things like that, which is, I think that's surprising.
Well, Secret Six.
That's why I said too many.
They
not perfect. Not perfect.
Yeah, they had so many tie-ins and crossovers and minis that you knew some of them were not going to be good. And plus, let's be honest, some of the characters that had got minis just aren't really good, interesting enough characters to begin with. So of course, the minis are probably not going to be good.
Well, even some of the resurrected titles were fantastic, like the Starman, the Phantom Stranger, the Atom and Hawkman, stuff like that. But even with Blackest Night, just forgetting the arc itself, the prelude, one of the most popular issues is probably Green Lantern 42, which is the all Black Hand issue, where he leads up to him killing himself before he becomes, the entity of the Black.
That's a terrific issue, yeah.
Yeah, and so many people love that issue, and Jeff Johns has gone on record saying he believes that issue will be remembered for years to come as probably Doug Mahnke's single, finest achievement in comics. So it's just every time I go to my LCS and they have 4 different storefronts, but one of them is a discount comic shop. You go into the cheap bins and they have half a long box full of copies of issue 42. Not because they couldn't sell them, but because they sold so many that they ordered so many.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a hugely popular issue, and that's just one of the preludes to the big arc. So yeah, for sure. Mine was Captives of the Mad God. For those of you who know what I'm referring to, this is you could make the argument that it's actually issues 1 through 8, but primarily it's 5 through 8, and this is a storyline where the Green Lantern title has started up again following the Action Comics weekly run, and we finally have our own series again. And Hal is going to Oa because Old Timer, who is the Guardian who accompanied him and Oliver Queen on their hard-traveling hero's journey. Something has gone wrong with Old Timer. Essentially what this story is Old Timer has, throughout his travels, both with Oliver Queen and Hal, as well as his travels throughout the universe, because at one point he leaves the company of Green Arrow and Green Lantern to travel this cosmos. Old Timer has gone nuts and has essentially pulled to Oa a patchwork of all the places he's visited. So there's a town that Hal and Old Timer and Oliver visited on their hard traveling heroes days that's plunged right next to a city from Zudar, which is Tomar Ray's planet, and so on and so forth. It's a patchwork planet, a mosaic, if you will. And this is a story. It's not only a big kickoff to this new Green Lantern series, but it's one of the times you get Hal and Guy and John all together in this big story arc. They go up against a Guardian, and I don't want to do an entire plot synopsis, but the way it ends, some Guardians help Hal, John, Guy with Old Timer in defeating him. And as a result, the Guardians decide to restart the Green Lantern Corps, which obviously will be destroyed about 50 issues later. But this is a point where before this, you have kind of the Crisis-ish era, the Green Lantern Corps era, which we kind of talked about a bit on the Dr. DC podcast episode. But there was an era there for a little bit where there were about 5 to 10 Green Lanterns. You had Kilowog, and you had Salak and Chip and Aricia and Hal and so on and so forth. But they were all sort of headquartered on Earth, and Millennium happens and all of this kind of crap. But beyond those small groups of lanterns, there is no Green Lantern Corps beyond that, because in about issue 200, I believe, issue 200 of Green Lantern, the Guardians go off with the Zamorans to make Whoopi. I mean, that's essentially it. But they, there's weird story arcs, they don't come back, blah, blah, blah. And since issue 200, you have these set group of lanterns, and then you have the Action Comics weekly stuff, and that's kind of about it until this series, where you start off with Hal and John and Guy, but by the end of this, the Guardians say, we're going to bring back the Corps. So it's in much the same way I said that The Power of Ion was a bookend series. This story arc is also a very important bookend series, because you had so long without the Corps. You had some, but you had so long without the main group and the mythos, and then all of a sudden you have 3 major Earth Green Lanterns teaming up to face down a Guardian who's gone mad and blah, blah, blah. And it really shows the extent of the power of the Guardians as well as the Green Lantern Corps when it's harnessed correctly. And then at the very end, you get kind of the new beginning. We're bringing back the Corps. So I really enjoy that. I don't think we've ever covered it on the LanternCast before, Mark, but maybe we should at some point.
No, I think that's in the graphic novel, the Road Back, or the Long Road Back, or something like that.
I don't have that one, but maybe.
I think that covers the first 8, maybe the first 8 or 9 issues of the Gerard Jones run. But yeah, I actually have a lot of fond memories of the Gerard Jones run, because once I started backtracking, once I got introduced through Kyle, I went back and I started wanting to read about Hal. A lot of the stuff that was certainly at the time relatively easy to get was most of the the Gerard Jones run. So I was able to get Green Lantern #1 from the Gerard Jones run, and over the years pick up a lot. I just don't have the entire run, but I have a good chunk of the Gerard Jones run. So yeah, I do like that with John and Guy and Appa and Rose and all the characters that were introduced in that. So I did like that. So yeah, I actually would be very interested. We definitely could set some time to do. I think in general we should set some time to do more of the Gerard Jones run, because there are some interesting arcs in that during that era.
For sure. Doc, what are your memories of this? Did you ever read this story arc?
My memories are spotty of this one, to be perfectly honest. But my admitted blind spot is that I'm not a huge Kyle Rayner Green Lantern fan. Part of it is a matter of like exposure, but I'm also just like I said at the top, like I came up on Silver Age, so I'm all about Hal. I was all about Barry, even though I grew up in the Wally West era of Flash. Barry's always been my Flash. Like I feel that sort of like across the board. Like when things got changed up, like I hated like Nightfall in Batman. I now appreciate like Reign of the Supermen more than I did when I was younger. I didn't like the idea of like 4 imposters, which maybe is the point. Maybe that's what they wanted people to feel like. But I think for me, because Kyle's kind of one of those, I'm not as into him. I haven't gone through like the full kind of run of him as a Green Lantern. Most of my exposure to Kyle as a Green Lantern is through like JLA stories or things like that, as opposed to actually like his solo stuff.
Well, this is actually before the Kyle run. It's the start, because Kyle's run.
Oh shit!
Starts...
No, sorry, you're right. Yep, right.
Yeah.
Oh right, because Hal's still around.
Yeah. Because this is issue 5 through 8. Because Kyle starts at like.
Oh
5th.
right, we're at the beginning of this. Yeah, he starts. He shows up in, what is it, 48 or something? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I haven't read it, but I liked the Hard Traveling Heroes run though. So the fact that it has the tie with Old Timer, that is of interest to me. Like is that a particularly, like, other than it being the same character, is it a particularly like strong like reference to like that era?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because like Rose is from a town that they stopped in during Hard Traveling Heroes, and Old Timer keeps trying to convince Hal and stuff like that because he feels he has a bond with him.
Because they have a history,
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Yeah, like I said, I don't really have like a perspective on this arc. It's one that I don't know all that much about, but I'm interested. You've sparked the interest in me. I don't know if I'll actually get around to it before you guys get around to doing an episode. I might have to like hold off on listening to your episode if I'm still like trying to work my way through it.
No worries. All right, what your number 4? You said Rebirth number 4?
Yeah, Green Lantern Rebirth number 4. So this is the one. It's Ollie and Kyle and Sinestro kind of locked in battle. And the reason that I picked this, it's not the first or only example of a non-lantern using a ring, of course, but to me, the moment where Ollie takes the ring that like Hal had given him, puts it on. Oh God, how does he do he tries to do the oath and he can't remember the whole thing. What does he say here? Like a brightest day, a blackest night. He gets partway through and then he says like, crap, how does the rest of that go? But he manages to make a construct, an arrow construct, and he shoots Sinestro, but the effort of doing it completely exhausts him, completely like drains him. There's a couple of things that I find interesting about that. So like I said, and like we talked about on the Dr. DC podcast, it is not the first time that somebody other than a lantern took a lantern's ring and used it. You mentioned the infamous Doomsday Annual. There's but there was also like Weapons Master in the Justice League America run in the 90s, and Lord Malvolio in the 80s, whose I guess father had been a Green Lantern, and then he murdered him and took the ring. So like we've seen other people take the ring and use it before. But what I liked about this is that it sort of established the idea of it's not 100% foolproof that you're chosen by the ring, but the ring chose you because you have the capacity, like the ability to channel that willpower. It's not that other people absolutely couldn't, but it's that they aren't. It won't come naturally to them, and it could I mean, in Ollie's case, it exhausts him, but you could make the argument it could very easily kill you too to try and do it. And I think you see that idea spring up in other places. I think you see it with even in like as recently as something like Forever Evil. Batman uses that Sinestro Corps ring, and then later Sinestro says something about, next time you try to use one of my rings, don't hold back. There's something about channeling those sort of primordial emotional energies that's taxing on any sort of random individual. There's something special about people that wield lantern rings. And I like the idea that Sinestro considers Oliver to have like a weak will. Like Sinestro doesn't see that shot coming because he doesn't think he can pull it off. Green Arrow does summon the willpower to make a construct, but that's a very like temporary thing. But I like the idea that it also throws Sinestro off. Sinestro has like the old belief maybe that only the chosen can use the thing, but Green Arrow simultaneously proves him right and wrong. He proves him wrong in that he is able to make a construct, but he proves him right in that like he couldn't just sustain holding, holding the power of a Green Lantern. And I find that interesting. Again, like I said, I think my picks. I was trying to find things that sort of resonated with like the lore of the Green Lantern, and I like that idea. There's an exclusivity to the Green Lantern Corps, but it's not absolute, and I think that issue really like illustrates it.
For sure. I still remember that. I remember that page. You just see Ollie collapse, and you also see the strain on his, because it's a full page shot, right? Where he's shooting off the arrow. Yeah, he's almost collapsing as it's happening.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. You can imagine. I think of it almost like, when you hear those news stories about like someone's kid is like trapped under a car and then the adrenaline kicks in, they lift the car, but it like tears all the muscles in their body or something like that. To me, that's what that like page, what that moment is that he's, like up against the wall. Ollie has to do this thing, and he does, but it, whatever the mental or emotional equivalent of muscle tearing is, that's what happens to Ollie as he fires off that shot.
And there's also the conversation with Kyle afterwards when he says, is that what it's like every time? Or is that what it's like for you? And he goes, yes, every time that's what it's like. So it kind of does this. So it does establish the uniqueness of which I did like the fact that they tried to make it where not any Joe Blow can just take your power ring and go make a flying car in the sky and stuff like that. That you need to have. That not only do you need to have a unique ability, but you really need to focus to be able to use that ring to do anything with it, let alone make a impressive construct, making any kind of construct. But
yeah, well, and Kyle is also known for like his sort of creativity, right. Being an artist and that. So if he's able to make constructs with a degree of creativity, then that, like you said, that shows like the level of willpower that he possesses and can channel.
Right, so that was a nod to, even though this whole arc. The arc was about bringing back the core, the miniseries, but it really was bringing back Hal just as much. But as many people pointed out, that even though clearly Jeff Johns has much more of an affinity for Hal, the reality is, with a different writer, the easy way to go would have been to have Kyle die in that miniseries. It's like out with the old, in with the new, and vice versa, really, in this case. Yeah. But instead, that Kyle really gets elevated, even in the process. He gets elevated, and Green Lantern. We're going to talk about Rebirth more later. Rebirth 4 is probably, I think, both 3 and 4 are really good. So I don't want to put the cart in front of the horse, but
sure.
I like 4 because of the fact that 4 is when Hal gets returned to his body at the end.
Yes.
4 has that, and to me that is that 2-page, the last 2 pages of that book, when the ring flies away from Ollie, flies past Sinestro, and he has this dumbfounded look on his face, goes over to Hal's body in the coffin when he's still in the parallax armor, goes to him. You see, Ganthet has returned Hal's spirit to his body at that point, and you see Hal's thoughts about how now he no more fear, no more confusion. He's thinking like him, like myself again. The gray temples are gone, and and then that final splash page when he steps out of the coffin, like Sinestro, get the hell away from them, and he's got the ring. I mean, to me that is. I remember when I first got that issue and the goosebumps that gave me when I got that issue, and to me that is there are lots of things that are memorable in Rebirth, but to me that final page of that issue is probably the thing that I remember the most about Rebirth. So yeah, that's if you were going to pick one issue, that was a really good one to pick.
Yeah, and it's like I think the narrative box was something like I think I don't have it in front of me, but I still remember it was like, I call to it, it comes to me as it always did, something like that. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, tying it into his like a plane, my girl, or something like that. So yeah, that was just great. It was great writing. It was just the way the art was, how you saw the subtlety, and you could see the physical changes in him, and then just when he basically came back to life, and he came back to life that was the moment, the real moment, if you will, of Hal Jordan, his individual rebirth, physically and everything, emotionally, spiritually. So that was,
Uh-huh.
Yeah, totally.
All right, number 3s. I'll start here. I went with the origins and history of Thorn, as in Rosenthorn from the Golden Age.
Ooh.
Doc?
I went with DC Comics Presents number 26.
Mark?
kind of a cop-out a little bit because we touched upon the main arc. I'm going to go with Green Lantern 25, Volume 4, Green Lantern 25.
Gotcha. All right, the origins and history of Thorn. This one's a little complicated, but bear with me here. So this is a couple of different issues. This is from the Golden Age, Flash Volume 1, issues 89 and 96. This is with Jay Garrick. This is Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane number 113 and Infinity Inc. Annual number 1. Rose and Thorn from the Golden Age is Rose Canton. Rose Canton is her civilian identity. Thorn, at least in terms of who you think she is in the beginning, is supposedly her sister. Her evil sister with, like, think Poison Ivy sort of powers. In one of the issues, I believe 96, of The Flash, she gets into a fight with Jay Garrick. However, there was an unpublished story of Rose Canton / Thorn going up against Jay Garrick. It was never published. However, 2 pages of it were published in Superman's Girlfriend Lois Lane number 113. She goes up against Jay, gets knocked out, whatever, and Alan agrees to take her with Wonder Woman's permission to a different island. I forget the name of it. It was like Recovery Island or something like that. But essentially Paradise Island to kind of help her out because Rose and Thorn are the same person. Now they don't really know this, but this is revealed later on. You find all of the entirety of the story out in Infinity Inc. Annual number 1. And what Infinity Inc. Annual number 1 tells you is that when Alan drops off Rose at the island and flies off, that time period, Rose has become obsessed with Alan, or with Green Lantern. One day she overhears Wonder Woman talking about something and learns that Alan Scott and Green Lantern are one and the same. Somehow she gets away from the island, finds him, dyes her hair black, and under the name Alex Thorin, that's Alyx or something like that, Florin, sorry, not Thorin, Florin, falls in love with Alan. They get married. They have a honeymoon in which they sleep together under like a green bubble construct thing he makes. And when he passes out, I guess after their honeymoon night, she puts on the ring, which reawakens her Thorn personality. She goes nuts. The place explodes, burns down. Alan manages to get out, but thinks that quote-unquote Alex is dead. Well, Rose manages to get control of herself back, and a few months later, she has 2 babies, twins, Jade and Todd, also known as Jade and Obsidian. So Jenny Lynn Hayden and Todd, Jade and Obsidian. This entire story arc is sort of told spottily throughout comics history, and then retroactively told in this Infinity Inc. annual. But I put it as my number 3 because for a long, long while, Alan Scott was just a statesman, a member of the JSA, so on and so forth. In this Infinity Inc. annual, he goes from statesman to father. And I think it makes a huge change, not a huge change in terms of who he is, but his role in the DCU and the aspects of his personality. Especially when you consider that without this, you wouldn't have like Kyle dating Jade and Alan as his sort of mentor. And there are so many things that come out of the concept of Alan hooking up with Rose/Thorn/Alex to create Jade and Obsidian that there's so many branches. You have Infinity Inc. and the All-Star Squadron and all this stuff. You have Kyle dating Jade, you have the stuff with Obsidian, you have the Heart of Darkness and the Starheart, and the way Alan relates to the Starheart and how the kids relate to the Starheart. I mean, there's so many things that we won't bore you with the details with, but it's a huge, huge piece of Alan's development beyond just a Golden Age founder of the JSA statesman.
Totally. Well, and I mean, I think the thing in there too is not in terms of like when the things were published, because obviously that's all over the place, but like if you think in like the internal chronology of the DCU, it puts Alan as not only one of like the original superheroes, but it also puts him as one of the original superheroes to have a thing with one of his villains.
Twice.
Well, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Thorn, and then later he dates Molly Mayne and marries her, who is Harlequin.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He's got a bit of a track record. So does Batman, I guess. But
Mark, anything to add?
I don't have that much to add. That was a good choice, though. That was kind of, I guess, based on your love for Alan Scott, it shouldn't have surprised me too much that you would have gone there. But it was. Alan Scott is a really good character. Obviously, it would be nice to see more of him in the current DCU. Eventually, kind of, sort of, some point.
Well, we did just get a huge Johnny Thunder sort of spotlight on Doomsday 3 or whatever.
Yeah.
So far, there's only been just the light teasing about Alan Scott. Just in those extra pages from Doomsday Clock 2, I think, yeah.
And only like a year and a half to go, and we'll find out what happens.
I know. It's going to be so long.
Now you have to think this is at least. I have to put the blame on Johns because everything Johns touches always ships late. You like to blame.
Wow.
It's easy to blame the artist, but Jeff Johns has a pretty good track record of almost every project he's on always being delayed, whether it's Infinity Crisis, Blackest Night. I mean, it's sad but true. I mean, so
that's what happens when you get into those like big like epic stories and everything. He probably gets halfway through an individual script and goes like, "Oh shit, I forgot something." He's gonna go like make sure everything's in there.
But at least
if you read like the original script for like Rebirth, like forget like forgetting something, but how many times does he write a story and then change it like utterly 4 or 5 times?
Yeah, completely.
Even though not all of that necessarily was his idea. Like, I don't know the idea of change. I don't remember if the idea of changing Ganthet being possessed by Parallax as opposed to Batman, which is what was supposed to happen. I don't know if that was his call or not. That might have been DiDio's call to change that. But I agree, things change, but it's harder. It's not to go off on too much of this Doomsday Clock tangent. It's just hard, really, to understand why this should be such a delay when this thing has obviously been being planned for a while, and it's not. And yes, he has responsibilities with the movies, but it's not like he's writing a crap ton of books like he used to when he used to be involved in these projects. He's really not writing anything. So, I mean, maybe actually this could. I mean, being objective, maybe this really isn't his fault. Maybe this is the art. Maybe this is more of an art issue. But if you're looking at the track record, no matter who his artist is, it always seems like there's delays in these events when Jeff Johns is doing them.
No, I feel like Gary Frank did pretty well when Superman Secret Origin was coming out. I think I remember some small delays, but the Superman Secret Origin 6-issue miniseries, I think, was relatively on time. Monthly.
And I don't remember if Forever Evil was delayed much. It might have been, but I don't remember the actual release schedule all that much. But
I think 7 got pushed back by a month, which threw off the chronology a little bit.
Oh yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. Yeah,
relatively on time.
Yeah, I think you're right, because it wasn't like it's because they had to push back one of the Justice League issues or something too, because of the Justice Crew stuff. I think they had to push.
Well, yeah, that back. and Luthor joining the League, and that they had to bump
Yeah.
Justice League because of.
All right, Doc, you're number 3.
All right, so like I said, it's DC Comics Presents number 26. So in that issue, Superman encounters who he thinks is Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, and it's not. it's a faux Green Lantern, like a decoy. And the reason that I picked this is that in this story, this decoy lantern creates kryptonite with its ring to incapacitate Superman. Now, it's not 100% a lantern creating kryptonite, but I think it is important because it maybe says more explicitly what is implied in other issues, that not everything that a lantern creates is purely a light construct. And the best example of that is actually outside of this issue, but it's just their uniform. Their uniform acts, as fabric. It could be like grabbed and pulled and torn and things like that, but it's technically a construct. If they take the ring off, the uniform goes away. And so I think what this issue does in terms of like when you're building sort of canonical evidence for what a Green Lantern can do is that it does show that even though everything comes from green light constructs, they can replicate either the textures, colors, abilities of things that are not light related at all. And I think in a way, something like that in that issue, and I mean, a lot of stuff in the Silver Age, I think people have a tendency to sweep under the rug or forget about, because a lot of it gets retconned or forgotten or whatever. But I think in a way it makes, when Hal attempts to rebuild Coast City, I think it makes that like way more tragic, and his like turn to Parallax makes a lot more sense when you think that this issue sets up that ring literally can do things that are beyond the scope of just light. Because when you first read Emerald Twilight and he tries to rebuild it, and you're like, that's never really going to take the place of the thing. It's just like green light versions of people in places that don't exist anymore. But when you realize that like what he's really trying to do is channel even more willpower to make those things permanent and real, and then you see what he tried to do as Parallax during Zero Hour, I actually think that this book is the thing that makes all of the motivation of those other things make sense. There's even I'm not going to remember which issue it is, but there's a Silver Age comic where Green Lantern literally turns himself into an envelope and has Pieface mail him to the bad guys. Like it's. So between this issue and that one, I think it sets up this idea that with maybe enough willpower, that ring can do anything, which I think is important.
We said we were going to argue this in the Dr. DC episode, but we didn't, so we'll argue it now.
Yeah, let's do it.
There's a caveat, though. They're in another time dimension.
They are.
So, and the way this dimension looks, I don't know if you guys remember the episode of Justice League, the animated series, where they go into that Cthulhu-esque dimension.
Oh, yeah.
That's where I feel like they are. And when you're in that sort of mind-bending reality space, I think he could simulate something that is like kryptonite or acts like kryptonite. But I don't think outside of that dimension you could.
Yeah,
because
well,
I feel it's part ring, part mind-bending physics.
It could very well be, but I think, to me, like I said, it's weird to say that I'm picking this issue, because maybe this issue is more incidental to the other evidence. But I think
this is for you, so it doesn't matter.
I think this is like the linchpin, though, in the idea that, like, how come all of their costumes aren't just the glowing green energy from the movie, right? They actually act like fabric. How come he could turn himself into an envelope? How come he thinks he can bring back Coast City with just light? I think, to me, this issue is like the missing piece of that puzzle, which is that I think it's actually happening in that other dimension. I think that ring is actually making kryptonite, and this is the issue that shows that it can do it. So I think I might be pulling in other things to make the argument. Maybe it's not self-contained in this issue, but I think it's actually happening in there.
Hey, it's also the first appearance of the new Teen Titans.
It absolutely is. That's what the Green Lantern ring really made.
Mark, do you remember reading that issue of DC Comics Presents?
Actually, I do not remember reading that issue. But
It's an interesting one because the whole thing isn't a cover. It's got all sorts of like side blurbs, and like a very small portion of the cover is the image, but it's an image you've probably seen where Superman's in the foreground, sort of crouched down, kind of shielding himself, as Green Lantern's in the background, creating a giant sort of kryptonite meteor above his head.
sounds somewhat familiar. I can't.
Yeah.
It's vintage, like, Silver Age. It's like the healthy dose of sort of like silly dialogue and like weird sci-fi and things like that. Like it's the perfect example of a Silver Age comic. But yeah.
It gets pretty interesting towards the end, too, because Superman's like, well, I sort of left right before I was trying to catch a guy. I think he fell to his death. And Hal's like, oh, don't worry. We can go back to right the second before. And like they leap out and Superman saves him. Or Green Lantern actually saves him, I think, with a construct sort of cushion or something like that.
Again, vintage Silver Age. Just no stakes.
All right, Mark, go for it.
So Green Lantern 25, it is obviously part of the Sinestro Corps War, but the relevance of it overall is super significant. Green Lantern 25 is what really introduces us to the emotional spectrum. It gives us a couple of really wonderful splash pages when they're kind of showing even though they're kind of like not full reveals about all these other cores at first, but you kind of they touch about, they have the hands clutching the orange battery, which of course is technically a screw up now because they have human hands clutching that battery. When they were talking about how the power of avarice was discovered by, the one whose greed knows no end, and actually we know it's Loriflees now, but at the time you thought it was a human being.
It could be a flash forward to Hal,
I always thought it was going to be Superboy Prime. That's who I thought it was going to be, because it kind of would make sense because of his greed and his desire to have his world back and nothing else. But either way, the influence of showing all the other cores, the Indigo Tribe, the Blue, and then leading to that glorious double splash page, which of an event we still technically have never had, which is the true War of Light, where you have all the other cores squaring off when you first get to see the first renderings of Atrocitus and Saint Walker, among others, and Arkillo. Actually, not Arkillo. There's somebody. I think Monk. I think Monk is actually in there too, or it looks like it might be Monk. But so I think, and of course, because of the fact that at the end of 25, almost like a teaser, they give you that little teaser trailer at the end, telling you about how we kind of like with the beats. I think they mentioned how in 2000 something about 2005 Hal Jordan returned, and like 2007 was the Sinestro Corps War, and in 2009 the Dead Shall Rise, and knowing the Blackest Night is coming. Plus 25 ends with the Anti-Monitor getting sucked right into the and getting trapped. Doesn't it end? Isn't that how it ends?
It just ends with him getting sucked.
Ooh.
If you gotta go with a smile.
That's actually one of the great moments of that issue is the Anti-Monitor has been reduced to energy without his sort of shell.
Yes.
And is on the ground on Riot, just like crawling, and then all of a sudden you hear what we now know as Necron's voice, and this black battery reaches up around him and closes, and like it's a relatively like quiet panel in terms of sound effect or narrative bubbles or whatever, but like I don't know a single person alive who reads that portion of the comic and doesn't hear this giant bass cosmic door closing sort of sound.
Yeah.
Like we're just boom. And you're like, oh shit, what is this? So like it's a pretty well done panel. But yeah, 25 for sure. I mean, we've debated back and forth on if this is like a good single issue to give somebody, because there are issues of almost any series where you can be like, oh, read this one issue of Batman if you've never read a comic before or whatever. But it's so hard for you and I, Mark, at least, to be like, hey, this one issue of Green Lantern, this one single issue you should try.
There is a fair amount of exposition in that one, though. Like, in a way, I think you're probably right. It probably does make, like, an okay introduction, because you get a little bit of, like, a crash course in, like, the new sort of status quo for the Green Lantern sort of mythos.
Right, because it kind of gives you a flashback and gives you a flash of the present, and it also gives you the flash forward of what's about to come. So it is actually a good jumping on point. It absolutely is.
For sure. All right, Doc, you're number 2.
All right. This one's a twofer. It's Green Lantern Volume 2, number 40, and Crisis on Infinite Earths, number 7.
You stole my number 1. I'll talk more in depth about it, but that's my number 1.
Now I feel like I really have to justify why mine's number 2 and not number 1.
It's all right. I don't know. Maybe I'll just join in instead of talking about my number 1. I'll just join in with you. I don't know.
Sure.
Make it kind of save some time. Mark, your number 2?
Green Lantern Rebirth as a whole.
All right. My number 2, Green Lantern Green Arrow. That is the Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams run, specifically issues 76 through 89.
All right.
Take it away, Doc.
Hey, you got it. So, well, Chad, you picked this for your number 1. You know where I'm going with this. So between Green Lantern Volume 2, number 40, and Crisis on Infinite Earths, number 7, we get the story of Krona. We in the former issue, we just see that old experiment gone wrong. He witnesses the moment of creation, but it doesn't really get expanded on of like what the impact of that act is. We know you're not supposed to see the moment of creation. We know it causes problems, but it's not until Crisis on Infinite Earths number 7 that we realize that when he did that, it created the multiverse. It created the infinite Earths. It sort of fractured reality, and it also, more importantly, created the antimatter universe, and of course then the anti-monitor, the opposite of the positive matter universe and the positive monitor. And this is important in terms of the actual like structure upon which all subsequent DC kind of multiverse theory is built. The infinite Earths, like the parallel Earths, had long been a thing in comics. They introduced it in Flash number 123 with the Flash of Two Worlds, and just wrote off the Golden Age as Earth 2. It like that, and then they had all these crises on whatever Earth 3 or Earth X or whatever they wanted to do. And it wasn't until we get to Crisis on Infinite Earths that they actually explained that this piece of Green Lantern lore is actually tied into like the actual history and fabric of the nature of existence. Krona is the reason that there are multiple Earths. Krona is the reason that there's an anti-monitor. He's in his own way, he's the source of now this ultimate destruction, which is the Crisis. So I find it interesting in the same way that, as we've talked about with like Jeff Johns, taking something that was maybe like a little bit touched on and then expanding it or giving it new meaning or giving it deeper meaning, is that Crisis on Infinite Earths #7 takes that Green Lantern 40 story of Krona and then gives it a whole new resonance by basically upping the stakes, tying it into the entire multiverse.
Yeah, it's my number one because, Doc, you don't know this because you guys don't play any other podcast promos on your show, but me and Mark recorded 2 different promos and for our show for our fellow podcasters to play on their episodes. And one of those promos, we say that the history of the DC universe is the history, or the history of Green Lantern is the history of the DC universe. This is our proof. Without Green Lantern and the Green Lantern lore that existed in the Silver Age and so on and so forth, even to some extent the Golden Age, you wouldn't have the DC universe as it exists now because of these 2 issues, which I'm proud to say I own Green Lantern 40. A lot of people say Flash 123, you mentioned the Flash of 2 Worlds, is by far the most important issue when it comes to the multiverse. Okay, I can see your point. However, I would argue Green Lantern 40 is equally as important. Not like just a secondary, but as on par important to the history of the multiverse.
It's the sleeper issue, though, right? Like Green Lantern 40 only becomes that important in the context of Crisis 7.
Right. But
if you were looking at it beforehand, it's got to be Flash 123. But yeah, I totally agree with you. Once we get to the point where all of that is sort of retconned into place, then yeah, that story in Green Lantern 40 becomes like a huge, huge part of DC history.
For sure. In Green Lantern 40, what is unleashed by Krona is just essentially evil. They talk about how brother kills brother and so on and so forth. But both in that issue and in this issue, and in Crisis 7, it's essentially said that though Krona is the one who did this, Krona is one of the Guardians. And as such, the Guardians still feel responsible because one of their own did this to the universe. So Krona's actions are the reason the Guardians decide to protect the universe, which they first do with the Manhunters, which is mentioned in Crisis 7. But that's a failed experiment, so the Green Lantern Corps is created. So this is the linchpin for the origins of Green Lantern, the Guardians' sort of biggest mistake. This is the origin of the multiverse, the antimatter universe, the anti-monitor and monitor. It's all here. Not to mention, this is something that is so epic and legendary that the image that Krona sees when he looks back in time of the hand holding the galaxy or whatever is the image you see from now on, essentially in the DC universe, anytime someone wants to talk about this subject. And this is what Pariah did. He replicated Krona's experiment. So there's so many tendrils that reach out from these 2 issues.
And it totally makes sense, too, that all of these things tie together. There's a long history of Green Lanterns and the antimatter universe, when you're talking about Quard and the Weaponers and things like that. There's also then, later, after Crisis, who is it that starts the Crisis in Time and tries to rewrite time itself? It's former Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, Parallax. It's this constant loop of... Yeah, I think you're right. The Flash often gets sort of the spotlight or the credit as being tied to these sort of multiversal events, but Green Lantern is just as in there. He's almost like the unsung mythology of all of the crises. The Flash plays maybe a more overt part, but behind the scenes, the way that the cogs of the universe are turning all seem to bend towards Green Lantern.
Yeah, because Flash, you can go there. But hey, this entire thing exists because of this.
yeah, precisely, yeah.
Yeah. Mark?
It's always Krona. Echoing that theme, it's always Krona. and how it has been, now, that joke wouldn't even work if it wasn't for those issues. And yeah,
you can thank those issues for that.
You can thank those issues for that. That it's always, if there's somebody screwing around with the fabric of time and doing things you shouldn't do and sucking life out of the universe, and putting evil into it, sucking energy out of it, and all that stuff. It's Krona. Oh, that Krona. But again, kind of echoing thoughts that you guys were just mentioning, the idea that, yeah, when you really think about it, when you have these big crisis level events, that Green Lanterns, one way or the other, they do tend to be tied in it. Obviously, Hal and company played a big role in Infinite Crisis, basically drawing that line against Superboy Prime. So that was kind of relevant. We saw even in God help us, we saw even in Convergence, because how important Parallax was to basically undoing the actual crisis on Infinite Earth, so the entire multiverse would survive instead of being destroyed the way it was. So yeah, we can all take all these back to this glorious moment of Krona being a douche. Some things never change.
It's a nice way to sum it up.
Yeah.
All right, go for it, Mark. Rebirth.
I mean, Rebirth pretty much stands on its own. I think it doesn't need a huge introduction, but maybe a little bit, only from the point of view that obviously at the time before Rebirth, Kyle was still Green Lantern, but that book was starting to wind down as far as being a big seller. I mean, it seemed like Kyle had kind of peaked. Doesn't mean they couldn't have revamped him, but obviously nothing had really kind of jump-started it again. Certainly since the Mars and Banks era kind of ended. So it kind of was naturally paving the way, and I'm sure in the back of his mind, Jeff Johns probably had. One of the things we've talked about asking him if we ever get the opportunity, of course, would be when he first did like Judgment Day and brought Hal back as the Spectre. Was that kind of like step one? Did he already have in his mind's eye how, given the opportunity, how he's going to bring Hal back as Green Lantern? Because as a Hal fan at the time, I had kind of given up on Hal becoming Green Lantern again, and I was okay with it because I liked Hal as the Spectre. Because in a way, technically, he was more powerful. Arguably, he was more powerful. Maybe it is questionable if you go back to the peak of Parallax power right after he absorbed the Central Power Battery and was beginning Zero Hour. But he was serving a noble mission, seeking redemption on his own by helping other people find redemption. So I was kind of looking forward to that moment when Hal was going to continue along this journey, and eventually there'd be this big crisis-like story they would do where Hal would make the ultimate sacrifice probably, and he would be forgiven, and he would get to go to heaven, and boom, that would end Hal Jordan. So I was kind of a little nervous about how they were going to approach bringing Hal Jordan back. And they made it clear from the get-go that it was about bringing back the Green Lantern mythos, the core and everything. It wasn't just about bringing back Hal Jordan. So when Rebirth first started coming out, the way it was very well written, very well drawn. There were some subtleties that you didn't pick, that when you first read it, if you really weren't paying attention, you might overlook stuff like when the Spectre was dealing with Black Hand, how he had that kind of moment when he kind of wasn't really, he was kind of still wearing the Spectre's cloak, but he really was Parallax underneath, the way his armor was and the way the glove was and things like that. That there were some subtle things in there that at the time you kind of thought a little bit of, and you may have thought, oh, maybe this is Parallax jumping back into time again, or jumping ahead to take over the Spectre because he knew Hal was going to be inside and all this stuff. But just the way Johns put all the pieces together, when you had issue 3, I believe, when you had the whole reveal of the origin tying into the entity and tying it into Sinestro, and how Parallax called out, the entity called out to Hal to explain the great temples. They have they even had that really nice panel, which again it's Darrell's artwork when in the original issue, so it was cool. But Parallax without his cape just does not look really good at all. Thank God they added in the cape. But they kind of replicate that first scene of Parallax, when he's steps out of the central power battery with his hand raised and the energy coming off of it, and then they just do the retcon of it, of him basically having the Parallax entity behind him, almost like him stroking the entity. That was like, in a way, that was like the pinnacle of the quintessential example. If you're going to do like a retcon / Jeff-con, that's how you do it. Because it's not, we saw the same scene originally, but now you're seeing something in that scene that you couldn't have possibly seen before, but it didn't change things. Yeah, there's some flaws with it. I always point this out. It doesn't really explain why it was always a shaky proposition, where especially an entity based on fear, why it would have a whole lot of faith that things were going to, why it would let itself be sacrificed in Final Night. Because if it knew in the future it was going to be Hal was going to come back at the Spectre, then you think Hal would know that too, because that knowledge could only be gained by time traveling during Hal's time jumping. Parallax would know that on his own. So that was kind of shaky. Why Parallax, an entity born out of fear, would willingly, basically, not free himself for Hal as he was about to die in the sun. You think this is a good time to get out of Dodge. And, of course, the Parallax name, which I will always go back to. It makes no sense for a fear entity, but it made perfect sense for what Hal was after Emerald Twilight, since he was seeing things from a different perspective. That the universe hadn't changed, but Hal was looking at it differently, so it seems to have changed. Like the quintessential Parallax we all can do in our everyday life, which is when you lay on the side of your bed on a pillow. You close one eye, the pillow's over here. You close and open the other eye, the pillow's down here. Pillow doesn't move.
Yeah, actual parallax vision.
Right, an actual what a parallax really is, not in the time-space aspect of what a parallax is, but the basic breaking it down to what it truly is. It's just looking at when an object appears to move because you're looking at it from a different perspective, and that was perfect for what Hal was. Doesn't really fit a fear entity, but the way Rebirth set the stage to bring back the core. Reestablish Hal Jordan as Green Lantern, give a plausible explanation for why Hal should not necessarily be held 100% accountable for everything he did on his own. There was also the cool moment when he knocked Batman on his ass. That was cool. And yes, from an understanding perspective, it would have made more sense for Batman to be possessed by Parallax. If you were looking for that moment of forgiveness and understanding a little more natural, it would have made sense for Batman to experience what Hal did and realize that despite his will too, that he only had so much control. But to me, that is what has really modernized Green Lantern, and even though we've obviously seen the franchise gone a hell of a lot closer to where it was probably at the end of the Kyle run right now over the last few years compared to what it was. But during that time from like 2004, I think, when Rebirth started, through 2005, and then the relaunch of the series and everything else, at least probably through 2013 when Jeff Johns left that book, that was a lot of people don't like what Jeff Johns did, and you don't have to like all of it. I don't like all of it. But you can't argue with how successful and how popular he made the character. And this was probably, if it's not the best example of Jeff Johns' work, it's right up there. And I think that's what.
Yeah. I mean, even more than something like Infinite Crisis,
which was also very good. Infinite Crisis, I really liked.
Like Rebirth is like Green Lantern Rebirth is. It sort of sets Jeff Johns up as the guy you go to when you don't want to completely erase something, but you basically want to like bring it back to where it was, but keep everything that came before it. Like every Rebirth thing that's happened since then, everything that like Jeff Johns touches, like going back and looking at sort of like wacky Silver Age villains or anything like that, he doesn't throw away too much of their original stories, but he does like realign it or like redefine things so that it makes sense and moves it in a new direction.
Yeah, and if you're paying attention to Green Lantern Rebirth, I mean, it sets up more than just what Mark mentioned. Yep. It sets up even the emotional spectrum.
Yep.
There's a panel where Ollie and Kyle are having a conversation, and he says, As he's recharging, Kyle says the central battery the Guardians made. It collects willpower from every living being in the universe, raw emotional willpower converted into energy, amplified by our own 1,000,000 times over. There's an emotional electromagnetic spectrum out there that can be harnessed and used. Green willpower is the most pure, and then Ollie interrupts. So, I mean, there's so many things in there that if you're paying attention, and, you know, this leads to
Rebirth. Well, I mean, this isn't a surprise, but Green Lantern Rebirth all the way through Blackest Night is basically one story with multiple chapters. But it's like you said, it's stuff that's set up in there, pays off all the way through Blackest Night and everything that came in between.
And some of the artistic cues, like, you know, if you watch some documentaries, at least that's how I figured out about it. You know, the Sinestro, the way Sinestro is drawn, every single time he's fighting anybody until Hal comes back, he's just floating there with his hands crossed, letting the ring do the work. But when Hal shows up, he starts moving and, you know, throwing punches and so on and so forth. To Sinestro, everybody else is beneath him, but Hal shows up, and that's the challenge. That's when he needs to get his hands dirty. And then there are things like, you know, when Parallax says the very creepy thing after Coast City's being rebuilt, and he explodes that apartment building, and he says something to Hal along the lines of, I have no interest anymore in keeping you placated or whatever. And you're like, oh, shit. What? You know, stuff like that. And it's just like, and in this whole story arc really, you know, leads me to the thing that, you know, some people, Doc, disagree with me on. Like, you know, like Parallax, Hal Jordan is responsible for his actions as Parallax, but, you know, that's neither here nor there. we don't have enough time to get into that right now.
Yeah. Agree to disagree. Yeah.
Okay, my number 2. Green Lantern, Green Arrow, the Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams run, specifically those issues from 76, which is the start, to 89, which is the end until he appears and starts appearing again in the Flash backups. It was close to my number 1, but just considering the impact of the DC multiverse and how many other titles and important story arcs and so on and so forth that reaches, I had to make that number 1. But this is a close second. Everybody knows I do my Green Lantern, Green Arrow spinoff podcast focusing on this series. I won't go too far in depth. I'll give a brief history, and then that's it. Back in the 70s, late 60s, Green Lantern sales are dying. Julie Schwartz, my hero, editor at DC Comics at the time, calls in Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams and tells them to save the title. Well, as with anything, as we've heard actually from Ron Mars himself before, when a title is dying, this is the best time for you to do whatever the hell you want. Try something new. So Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams do just that. And in the very first issue, they show Hal to be sort of ignorant on the way things work down here, because he stops a young man from throwing things at a big fat cat landlord guy. But then it turns out that this guy owns a slum and keeps people living in poverty and so on and so forth. And as Oliver Queen leads him up to a building, this old black man says, I've seen you done a lot of things for the purple skins and the orange skins. Answer me this, Mr. Green Lantern. What have you done for the black skins? And all of a sudden, this big cosmic 60s goofy title comes down to Earth real quick, and you are stuck here on planet Earth with our problems, Hal Jordan, and how are you going to deal with it? And from then on, this series is in the muck with you, with Oliver and Hal, and sometimes Dinah Lance, Black Canary, and sometime and for a little while, Appa Aliapsa, aka Old Timer, a Guardian of the Universe. And it deals with pollution, racism, workers' rights, so on and so forth. And one of the most important issues of all time, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, or Green Lantern 85, where on the cover, Speedy, which is Green Arrow's sidekick, is shooting up heroin on the cover. And that is important for several reasons, not just because it's an important comic and an important topic speaking to kids, but in relation to comic book history, period. in the Comics Code Authority. So this series is important to Green Lantern. This series is important to comics history. This series is important to the comics industry. And which I'll be covering relatively soon, at least sometime this year. This is the series, which is Green Lantern 87, the introduction of John Stewart to the mythos. So not only is it important to the mythos and the universe, but to comic book history and the comic book industry as a whole. So I don't know. I have talked about it multiple times, both on the main show, on guest appearances on other shows, on my spinoff. I don't need to go into any more waxing rhapsodic on it. So Mark, Doc, you guys take it from here, or whatever you want to add in.
Yeah, I mean, there's not, without really like getting into it, there's not too much more to say, but other than what you already have. But I think the big point in there is the one that you brought up nearest the end, is like the impact in terms of what it did for the industry. Like having that image on a cover of Speedy shooting heroin that like broke the CCA like wide open. That is, I think you can make the argument like maybe the proto or the start of the Bronze Age. I know it's not technically, but I think you can make that argument because of where.
Well, the start of the series, Green Lantern 76. I wouldn't say Green Lantern 85 is, but Green Lantern 76 is probably the start of the Bronze Age.
But just that whole idea that and promoting the social justice issues and taking a character that can like divert comets and sitting him down with the issue of poverty and saying like, now how do you fix it? Like what construct fix poverty? Like that it was ahead of its time, it was both ahead of its time and also far too late. But I think there's something really special about it. It really paved the way for a lot of what comic book writing has become since then.
Mm-hmm.
Mark,
I know I had you on. I know I had you on the 85 and 86 episode, but I know we didn't speak too much general terms about the series overall. So,
I mean, kind of what Doc said and what you and I talked about too. The whole run, besides that, I mean, obviously those issues in particular, but the whole run, how relevant it is, it's relevant enough where people who haven't even really read those issues still, if you're a comic fan, you know of them. They have kind of stood the test of time at this point. That is memorable. We also, in context of that episode, we talked about the Harry Osborn thing in Spider-Man too, being on drugs, which is the pill popping and everything, and that Green Goblin arc. But I think Green Arrow, Green Lantern, that the run is memorable for all this, dealing with all the social issues at the time. The Speedy thing is super memorable. Like, I had never read those. I obviously knew of them. I'd never read those issues until I was coming on the spin-off to talk about them. So it obviously, it makes perfect sense that it's, right near the top of your list here, and it belongs there. And especially if we were making a general list, not just moving any personal feelings aside, just looking at it from a historic perspective. I mean, absolutely, that would have. There's no doubt that would always be in the top 5, but it'd probably always be. I think it would almost be guaranteed to be in the top 2, probably, if you were just going on a historical relevance, not just on sales or just like the zeitgeist of a moment or something that has come and gone but stood the test of time. It definitely belongs at the top of any Green Lantern event or arc or run, no matter how you define it, or issues, even a single issue or just a single storyline.
For sure. I've interviewed both Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams directly myself. Denny twice, Neil once. And, Neil is fond of saying, while Green Lantern, Green Arrow didn't directly 100% by itself destroy the code, those few issues kind of between 76 and 87 or 86, 76 and 86. He likes to say, quote, took the fangs out of the Comics Code, because the Comics Code didn't officially die until 2011. But as Neil Adams puts it, the fangs were out after the Speedy Does Drugs story.
Yeah.
All right, number ones. Mark, you're up.
Emerald Twilight.
Doc?
Green Lantern Volume 1, Number 9.
And I already said mine, so the Origins of the Multiverse, which was Green Lantern 40 and Crisis number 7. So we already spoke to that. So Mark, take it away.
It was kind of debatable at first where Emerald Twilight was going to rank in this, but again, if you're looking at historic significance, despite for pro and con, Emerald Twilight had to be on this list somewhere. I look at Emerald Twilight because again, it was a jumping on point, but again, I come at it from a different perspective, like I mentioned previously, that I started reading with Kyle. I actually didn't really start reading the Green Lantern regularly till 51. Though I always also say, I do remember 50 because I flipped through it when I was still working at Walden Books when I was putting it out on the rack. It's like, oh, what's so special about this? Because I just skimmed through it and I saw Hal still having an armor and everything else. It's like, oh, so what they do, just change his look? But I hadn't flipped through 48 or 49, so that would have helped. But just the relevance of that, the idea that they were starting over with a complete clean slate, and the pros and cons to doing that. Obviously, there was a lot of hell that Ron Mars caught. Ron Mars caught most of it, even though Kevin Dooley probably deserved more of it, realistically, and kind of like skirted, I think, the responsibility for that. Even though, I'm sure he may not have expected all the venom that he got, but obviously, I think Ron certainly must have expected at least a little bit about pushback. But first, your DeMars and Banks team, that was pretty relevant in Green Lantern history. You had the creation of a brand new character, a brand new Green Lantern, kind of changing the rules of the ring to a certain extent. No more yellow weakness, no more 24-hour time limit. You had the changing of Hal from your straight-laced ultimate, classic conservative good guy, and then all of a sudden here he is, kind of almost like having a Darth Vader like fall. And though, as both Ron and Daryl will tell you, that they never saw Hal as a villain, which is the main reason nobody has really written, other than maybe Dan Jurgens and Zero Hour, nobody has really written Parallax that well, other than has represented him well than his original creators in Mars and Banks, because they both got the essence of who Hal Jordan was still there. He had just been pushed to a breaking point. He broke. He did things differently. He looked at things from a different perspective. But the essence of what made, and Ganth had kind of addressed, and of course Ron wrote this issue too, but when you had Parallax Emerald Knight right before the final Night issue came out, you had Ganth speaking to Hal and making it clear that the essence of who you were has never changed. What made you our greatest champion is still inside you. So that's what they didn't get about Hal. And based on where Hal was and what he needed to do afterwards, Emerald Twilight kind of set the stage for that, and it made sense because Hal was the ultimate. Yeah, he questioned the Guardians. He wasn't one of these yes sir, no sir, just go along with every single thing and never say anything. He was kind of like, and I can relate to this too, he's somebody who's perfectly content to follow orders, but you kind of need an explanation. If you understand what the rationale is, it's easier for you to follow orders. Kind of like for anybody who's seen 2010, the year we made contact, when they reactivate the Hal computer, everybody's nervous that Hal's not gonna do what he needs to do in order for them to escape and head back home, because they need Hal to fire those engines at the right time, but they're afraid Hal's gonna he's gonna go 2001 on them again, and he's questioning, and once once he gets explained the reason why you need to do this, he just says, "Oh, I understand now. I'm fine with that." And that's kind of like the way Hal was similar in the perspective that he would question the Guardians, but he always believed they had the greater good in mind. And you get to the point where he just gets pushed and pushed and pushed. And yes, what he was really asking for wasn't just a little favor. There's no doubt about it. The idea of bringing back Cove City was not just a little favor. But it was just the fact, it was just a realization that every time, that the one time he asked for something after all those years of sacrificing everything, pretty much, he was kind of like flipped the bird on a cosmic level, and that just made him realize what was wrong with not just what was wrong with the Guardians, but what was wrong in the universe. And that was part of what Hal's mission was, to set up basically a new hierarchy where there was actually going to be a Guardian of the universe that actually was going to be proactive and not just sit there and, as Hal called them, impotent shams, like he referred to them in Emerald Twilight. So pretty much so much of what we know now, even before the retconning, the Jeff conning in Rebirth, so much of what we know now, what has at all comes from Emerald Twilight and the chain, and we wouldn't have had Kyle without Emerald Twilight, and the relevance of Parallax even before the whole entity thing. And so I think Emerald Twilight is huge.
Yeah, I mean, you can talk about the fall of a hero all you want, and I'm sure the Doc could rattle off 5 different heroes that have fallen from grace in the DCU at various times. but this is the one. I mean, it has to be. And this is not just as a biased Green Lantern fan. I mean, it is. They killed Superman and they broke Batman's back, but this is something else entirely. They broke the man. They completely evolved this character beyond a hero into something else. I mean, it's like that line from one of the Batman movies. You live long enough to see yourself become the villain or whatever. You die a hero, you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. This is
and Hal did both.
This is when you take into consideration just the timeline and when this happened in the DCU, sure, I'm sure a lot of people got pissed off and blah blah blah, but I mean, this is a ballsy ass move for them to pull, and they did it, and it was a good story. And then you take into context, where we are in time in 2018, and look at the complete arc that Hal had, and he was, I mean, considering how long he was out of the picture, not that just out of the picture, but going from, this to the Final Night stuff to then becoming the Spectre. I mean, he had this big arc of redemption, sort of, even though you get the Jeff Johns and the fear bug thing and all that explanation. It's still kind of a redeeming arc, regardless of your explanation for it. It's still a redemption arc. And it's just like, Batman got better. Superman got better, but this was something that stuck for a long time.
I think the big difference there is that it's one thing to take someone off the table by killing them or by crippling them, as happened to a number of characters, Flash, Superman, Batman, Green Arrow, list goes on, Black Canary even. But it's another thing to well, like you said, Mark, they didn't fundamentally change Hal, but he changed his outlook, changed his perspective. But that is the real ballsy move. It's one thing to alter the status quo for your hero, but what they did to Hal could only have taken a long time to circle back. Maybe not necessarily as long as it took to get to Green Lantern Rebirth, but you couldn't have immediately, even in the context of Final Night and stuff like that, immediately have brought him back to life. He needed that arc as the Spectre and attempting to shift that to from vengeance to redemption and things like that. He needed that whole arc for it to make any sort of sense, because what they did was take a character that people loved and identified with, and all they did was just give him this little nudge just off course, but it completely changed the course of those stories. And that wasn't that's not a simple thing to undo if you wanted to. So I think that's what's so, like you said, ballsy about it. It's like you can, Batman broke his back. It's like, oh, here's like a brace so you can walk, or like, like Superman died, like, oh, there's a Kryptonian regeneration matrix. Like you could undo death more easily than you can undo like the moral shift in Hal Jordan.
Nicely put.
All right, Doc, bring us home.
All right. This one is very simple. It's Green Lantern, Volume 1, Number 9. There's not a ton to explain. It is, if I've done my research correctly, the first appearance of the modern Green Lantern oath. It's Alan Scott saying it, but instead of his like kind of non-rhyming oath that he had for a bit and then he went back to in the Silver Age, this is the first appearance of "In brightest day and blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power, Green Lantern's light." And that's, I mean, I don't have like a big philosophical rant about it. I think that's probably, I put it at the top of my list because that oath sums up the whole core concept of the emotional spectrum of like Green Lantern, of what he symbolizes, what he represents. And that's the first time that it shows up in the way that we know it today. And it's like super iconic now, but that's its first appearance.
Do you remember the context of that? Was it any sort of significant moment in terms of like who he was fighting or whatever?
No, and this is the thing with the Golden Age stories. Where it really comes out of is that they were basically like workshopping oaths a little bit. There are a couple of versions, but this one ended up sticking. It's only sort of relevant, or it only resonates because it's unchanged now. But in terms of like the actual story of that issue, it doesn't like play a big part. It's not even like a thing where he's like, like how they did it in the, I hate to bring up the movie, but how they did it in the movie where he's like, he's like up against the wall and he like uses it as the mantra to give him the strength to fight Parallax or whatever. It's not even something like that. It's just go to charge your ring. Here's a new oath. And it ended up being the one that stuck. So like the issue itself isn't necessarily like full of emotional resonance, but it's historically significant because of what came afterward.
For sure. I mean, and it's actually it's the closest one to the OG oath. And I shall shed my light on dark evil, for dark things cannot stand the light of the Green Lantern. But it's just more extrapolated. So yeah.
And a little more like poem form, like it has like a rhyme scheme and syllable counts and things like that in it. But yeah, Alan Scott did go back to that original oath for a little bit during the Silver Age, and that was partly how they would differentiate between the Earth 1 and Earth 2 Green Lanterns. But yeah, and actually, I think that original oath also gets used by other Lanterns. Doesn't Tomar Ray use that?
I don't know about Tomar Ray specifically,
or some
but
version of it. There's a couple of like
there's some people who
members of the Corps
Alan's.
who use Alan's oath, and then obviously there's other Corps members who use like versions of the oath. Like isn't there? I'm not going to remember the character's name, but there's one who's blind, so his is all about like in loudest something and
loudest
Medfill
in, or
has
hushed
one
profound,
about,
my ears
right,
have the evil's slightest sound, or something like that. Let those who toll out evil's knell beware my power, the F sharp bell.
Yes, that's the one. Yeah, and
memory
and
baby
Medfill has one that's like plant based and things like that. Like there are lots of like versions of the oaths, but yeah, that the one that we know as like the Green Lantern oath that showed up in Green Lantern number 9. So that's why I picked it.
Good choice.
For sure. Yeah, there's really no extrapolation needed. I mean, it's the oath.
Yeah, I mean, I figured I don't think it's a more like concise point for me to end on than that one. It's like that's pretty much the reason I picked it. That's it.
All right, those are our top 5 most important moments in Green Lantern history for us.
We did it.
That's right. If you guys
Those are the definitive top 5s. Those are facts. Enter them into the history books. We did it.
If you guys have your own top 5 lists or anything you want to add to any of ours, don't hesitate to reach out to us and provide us those. But before we give you the closing information, Doc, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thank you for having me, and thank you guys for having been on our show too. It was a ton of fun to like get really into Green Lantern.
It was really cool. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a blast. So before we do our closing, you want to tell people how they can find your show and reach out to you guys?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to do it is just search Dr. DC Podcast. We're on Facebook and Instagram under that name. I'm on Twitter at Dr. DC. And then our website is drdcpodcast.com or .ca. All of our episodes are up there. We're on iTunes and Google Play and Libsyn and a few other services. But yeah, so hopefully you'll check us out. At least listen to that Green Lantern episode because you'll get to hear Chad and Mark deal with us. So.
And then listen to the Ragman episode.
Of course, listen to the Ragman episode.
It's your most popular episode to date, right?
Oh, far and away. Like, and it hasn't slowed down is the thing, right? It's not like it was our most popular one and the other ones just dropped off. It's that it has no signs of slowing down. Ragman is keeping the lights on at the Dr. DC podcast.
Yes!
It's your dream come true, Chad.
That's right. All right, Mark, you want to tell people how they can reach out to us?
I reckon so, Chad. LanternCast.com, that is the website. Email lanterncast@gmail.com. We are on Twitter and Facebook. Use hashtag GOcast to locate us on either of those. iTunes and Stitcher. We are available on both platforms, so whichever ones you listen to us on, please leave us a positive review. And last but not least, the voicemail, 708 Lantern. 708 Lantern, and let us know what you think.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you later.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.